My name is Amelia, and I'm 30 years old. The scream that ripped through the Sunday quiet of my father's house wasn't one of pain, but of pure, undiluted privilege being denied. It was a sound I had been funding for the last 5 years. He stormed into the study where I was waiting, his face the color of a thundercloud, his bespoke suit rumpled from his tantrum. My sister, Clara, trailed in his wake, her expression a perfect mask of practiced concern, a look she had perfected. Over years of enabling his behavior while secretly benefiting from it. He wasn't looking at me, not yet. He was still performing for an invisible audience, his voice echoing with the injustice of it all. Declined. In front of the entire club. Amelia. My card was declined. He finally spat my name like it was a curse, his eyes locking onto mine with a fury that used to make me shrink. I was finalizing the payment for the new yacht, the one I promised the Hendersons we'd take to Monaco. They just stood there watching. Do you have any idea what that kind of humiliation feels like? After everything I have given you, after all the sacrifices I made to raise you, you repay me by making me look like a beggar? For a moment, the old conditioning almost kicked in. The urge to apologize, to fix it, to smooth his ruffled feathers and restore the flow of money that kept him happy and me in his good graces. Clara was already starting her usual routine, her voice dripping with syrupy disappointment. Amelia, honestly, it must be some sort of bank error. Daddy is so stressed out, just make a call and sort it out. It's the least you can do. That was when I felt it, not fear, not guilt, but a beautiful, liberating calm. The calm of a person who had finally reached the end of a very long, very painful road. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I just looked from my sister's pleading face to my father's furious one and let the silence stretch. I let him feel the full weight of his powerlessness for the first time in his life. I let him understand that this was not a mistake. I waited until his shouting subsided into ragged breaths, and then I spoke the words that I knew would change everything forever. There's no error to fix. I called the bank this morning. I told them to do it. I closed the account, Dad. The card, the trust, the bottomless fund for your retirement. It's all gone. Clara gasped, a theatrical sound of shock. But my father just laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound with no humor in it. The sound of a man who believes he's just revealed the winning card. He leaned forward, his voice dropping into a low, menacing tone that was far more frightening than his yelling. You think you can just turn off the money? You foolish girl. You're forgetting who holds the real power. Your mother, God rest her soul, knew you were impulsive. She knew you couldn't be trusted. That's why she left me in charge in her. Well, you touch one more penny without my permission, and I will see you in court. You'll lose it all. This was his favorite weapon, the ghost of my mother, twisted into a tool to keep me in line. The threat had hung over my head for years, making me feel like a guest in my own life. It worked because my entire childhood was a training ground for his approval. I remember getting a scholarship to a summer science program when I was 16. I was so proud. I ran to show him the letter, and he barely looked up from his newspaper before pointing out that Clara had been voted most popular in her class yearbook. He tapped the page and said, "That, Amelia, that is what opens doors in the real world." My best friend, Sarah, saw it all. She wasn't some perfect helper with all the answers. She was just a normal person who saw the poison I was drinking. Over cheap coffee in our university days, she'd tell me straight, he's not going to change. Amelia, you could buy him the moon, and he'd complain that you didn't get him a star to go with it. I didn't listen. I thought success would be my shield. When my software company finally took off, I went to him, portfolio in hand, and offered to fund his entire retirement. I didn't do it out of kindness. I did it because I was still that little girl, begging him to finally say he was proud of me. He took the portfolio, scanned the numbers, and his first words weren't thank you or congratulations. His first words were, "This is a good start, but the house needs a new roof, and Claire's car is getting old." It was in that moment I knew Sarah was right. The hole was bottomless. But hearing him use my mother's well now, with such confidence, a new and terrifying thought began to form. What if it wasn't just a threat? What if he and Clara had actually done something to make it real? That cold laugh followed me all the way out of the house. It was the laugh of a man who believed he had already won, and the sound of it chilled me more than his shouting. The moment I got into my car, I called Sarah. My voice was shaking, not with fear anymore, but with a terrifying, bubbling rage. I told her what he said, what he threatened to do with my mother's will. Sarah didn't offer easy solutions or tell me it would all be okay. She just listened, and when I was done, her voice was firm. "You need to see a lawyer, Amelia. A real one, not your dad's old friend who sends him a bottle of whiskey every Christmas." She was right. The next morning, I called Mr. Hale, the family lawyer. His tone was syrupy and condescending, like he was patting a hysterical child on the head. He assured me it was just a family squabble and that he would have a word with my father. When I insisted on seeing a copy of the will he was talking about, he suddenly became very busy. He said the documents were in off-site storage and that getting them would take weeks. He was stonewalling me, and he wasn't even being subtle about it. That's when I knew my father wasn't bluffing. There was something in that document they didn't want me to see. If they were going to lock the front door, I decided I would have to find a window. That night, I couldn't sleep. So instead, I did the one thing I still had control over. I opened my laptop and began combing through the bank statements of the retirement fund I had created for him. For hours, I scrolled through endless charges for golf clubs, five-star restaurants, and luxury travel. It was disgusting, but it was what I expected. Then I saw it. A recurring monthly transfer for thousands of pounds made out to a company I'd never heard of, CB Lifestyle Ventures. It took me less than 30 seconds on the internet to find out who owned that company. The registered director was Claire Brooks. My sister. It wasn't just my dad living off my hard work. It was a coordinated operation. I kept digging, using my access to cross-reference dates and accounts. And then I found the email chain, accidentally forwarded to a joint account we rarely used. It was between my father and Clara. They were talking about draining the fund and then using the power from the amended will to force a sale of my company shares. They called me the Golden Goose. And the last email from my father read, "She's cutting us off. It's time to put the final phase into motion." The Golden Goose. Reading those words felt like a punch to the gut. It was one thing to know you were being used, but it was another thing entirely to see it written down, a cold, calculated business plan where I was the asset to be liquidated. Before I could even process the depth of their betrayal, they launched their final phase. Clara, with her masterful understanding of social media, painted a masterpiece of manipulation. She posted a tearful video, her voice cracking as she spoke about our poor, heartbroken father, abandoned by his cruel, money-obsessed daughter. She posted old photos of him looking frail, carefully chosen to make him look like a victim. The story caught fire. My face was everywhere, branded with hashtags like #FamilyOverFortune and #UngratefulDaughter. It was a public execution, and my father and sister were the smiling executioners. The fallout at work was immediate. Worried emails from investors started pouring in. A major partner called for an emergency meeting, talking about the optics of the situation. The company I had built from nothing, the one thing in my life that was truly mine, was being poisoned by their lies that my reputation was being shredded in front of the entire world. all because I had dared to turn off the tap. That's when I finally broke. I remember sitting in my apartment for a whole day, the curtains drawn, my phone buzzing incessantly on the table. I couldn't answer it. I couldn't face the accusations or the pity. Every cruel comment I read online felt like my father's voice, telling me I would never amount to anything, that I was a failure. A small, broken part of me started to wonder if they were right. Maybe I was the monster. Maybe I should have just kept writing the checks, kept smiling, and paid for the privilege of being part of a family, even a fake one. When I finally met with the new lawyer Sarah had recommended, I was desperate for a lifeline. Instead, he gave me an anchor. He was a sharp, honest man, and he didn't sugarcoat the truth. "Amelia," he said, his face grim, challenging this amended. "Will's going to be brutal. Your father and Holly were clever. On paper, it looks legitimate. Proving undue influence on a dying person is notoriously difficult and incredibly expensive. We can fight, but I have to be honest with you, the odds are not in our favor, and it could drain you of everything you have left." He was telling me that I was trapped. My father had built the perfect cage, and I had walked right into it. I went home from the lawyer's office feeling like a ghost. For the first time, I truly believed my father had won. Defeated, I drove to the storage unit where I kept the last pieces of my mother. Boxes of her books, her clothes, her photograph albums, things I hadn't been able to touch since she died. I wasn't looking for answers. I was just looking for comfort, for some connection to the one person in my family who had truly loved me. I sat on the cold concrete floor, pulling out an old wooden memory box where she kept letters and postcards. My fingers traced the worn edges, and I felt something give. A false bottom. My heart hammered against my ribs. Tucked beneath the layer of velvet was a thick envelope with my name written in my mother's elegant handwriting, and a small, old-fashioned brass key. With trembling hands, I tore open the seal. The letter wasn't long, but every word changed the world. She wrote that she knew my father's heart had grown cold. Consumed by jealousy of my success, she knew he and Clara saw me as a bank account, not a daughter. She described the day Mr. Hawley brought the papers to her bedside, how they told her it was a formality for her medical care, how her mind was clouded by medicine and pain when she signed it. "He thinks he is clever, my love," she wrote, "but he is not wise. He never knew that I kept a journal. Many journals. I wrote everything down, Amelia. Every cruel word, every financial trick, every time he tried to turn you against me. My mother wasn't a victim they had tricked. She was a fighter who had been documenting their war against her for years. She had been quietly gathering the evidence to protect me, even as she was dying. She was fighting for me when I didn't even know a battle was being waged." The last line of the letter explained the key. It was for a safe deposit box opened in her maiden name at a small bank across town. That is where she had hidden the journals. I stared at the small piece of brass in my palm. It wasn't just a key to a box anymore. It was a weapon. It was the truth. It was my mother's final gift to me, and the one thing that could set me free. The despair that had crippled me just hours before was gone, replaced by a cold, clear focus. The game was not over. It had just begun. The next morning, I walked into that small bank with my new lawyer, my mother's letter, her death certificate, and the key. The feeling of opening that cold metal box was indescribable. Inside were 5 leather-bound journals, filled with my mother's neat, steady handwriting. Page after page detailed my father's manipulations, his secret debts, and Clara's growing greed. My mother hadn't just left me a weapon. She had left me an entire arsenal. My lawyer photocopied every single page. Our first target wasn't my father. It was the man who enabled him, Mr. Hall. We sat in Mr. Hale's plush office, a stark contrast to my last desperate phone call with him. My lawyer didn't waste time with pleasantries. He simply placed a single page from my mother's journal on the desk, an entry detailing the day Mr. Hawley visited her and how he dismissed her questions about the document she was signing. Then he placed the nurse's sworn statement next to it. Mr. Hale's face went pale. He saw his career, his reputation, and his freedom evaporating right in front of him. Within an hour, he was giving a full confession, handing over every piece of evidence he had to save himself. The next blow wasn't delivered in an office, but to the public. We gave the entire story, backed by excerpts from the journals and Hale's confession, to a well-known investigative journalist. The story that came out wasn't about a family squabble. It was about elder abuse, fraud, and a calculated conspiracy. The tide of public opinion turned so fast it was like a tsunami. The hashtag ungrateful daughter hashtags were replaced with hashtag justice for Amelia. Clara's social media was flooded with so much venom she had to shut it down completely. The narrative they had so carefully crafted was utterly destroyed by the one thing they never counted on: the truth. My phone started blowing up with calls from my father and Clara. Their frantic, panicked voicemails were a pathetic mix of apologies, accusations, and desperate pleas for me to call this off before it gets worse. They still thought they could appeal to the person I used to be, but that person was gone. I deleted the voicemails without listening to the end. I picked up the phone, but it wasn't them I was calling. It was my lawyer. "It's time," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Set up a meeting. In your conference room. I want them on my territory now." They came to my lawyer's conference room looking like ghosts. The expensive clothes that once hung on them like armor now looked like ill-fitting costumes. They sat opposite me at the long, polished table, and for the first time in my life, they were the ones who looked small. There was no shouting this time, no screaming. The power in the room was quiet, cold, and entirely on my side of the table. My lawyer began, and with each document he placed before them, another piece of their world crumbled to dust. He laid out the fraudulent will next to my mother's real one. He showed them the bank records, tracking the money into Clara's shell company. He read from Mr. Hale's sworn confession. My father tried to bluster at first, calling it all lies and misunderstandings, but his voice was weak. Clara just sat there, silent tears streaming down her face. Her mask of manipulation finally shattered. The final exhibit was my mother's journals. My lawyer slid one across the table, open to an entry from the year I started my company. She had written about how my father had called my business a pathetic little hobby, and how he told her he was embarrassed that his daughter was a glorified computer nerd. My father stared at his late wife's handwriting, and all the fight went out of him. He just slumped in his chair, a broken old man. That was when I finally spoke. My voice was calm, even, and it cut through the silence like glass. "The district attorney has enough to press for felony fraud and elder abuse charges," I said simply. "But I've asked them to offer a plea deal. You will publicly admit to what you did, and you will sign over any and all claims to my mother's estate and my business. In return, you will not serve any jail time." Clara started sobbing about how sorry she was, how Dad had pressured her. But I didn't even look at her. I just looked at my father. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading. "And what about me, Amelia? What am I supposed to live on?" I let the question hang in the air for a moment before sliding one last document across the table. "I have set up a new trust for you. It will pay you a small monthly stipend, just enough for a small flat and basic groceries. It's the exact amount I earned in my first year of business, back when you told me I would never amount to anything. You won't starve, but the life you knew is over. My life is starting somewhere new, and you will not be a part of it. This is the last time you will ever see me. I walked out of that conference room and never looked back. I sold the big house I had bought for them, the one that had become a monument to their greed. I packed my bags, moved my business, and started over in a small city by the sea where no one knew my name. Sometimes when I'm walking by the water, I think about what my father said. You'll never amount to anything. For so long, I let that one sentence run my life. I worked myself to the bone, not for the joy of creating something, but to prove him wrong, desperately hoping that one day my success would finally buy his love and respect. The greatest lesson I learned is that you can't purchase validation. It's not for sale. Love, respect, and family are not commodities you can win by being successful enough or generous enough. They are either given freely or they aren't real. For years, I was pouring all my energy and happiness into a black hole of entitlement, trying to fill a void in my father that was never going to be filled. His problem wasn't a lack of money, it was a lack of character. And that was a debt I could never pay for him. From what I hear, he and Clara live in a small, rented house 2 towns over. Their public admission ruined any social standing they had left. Clara had to get a real job, working in retail, and she hates it. My father is just a quiet, lonely old man now, living a life far smaller than the one he felt he was entitled to. They lost more than just the money. They lost the person who, despite everything, had tried to love them. That is a consequence far greater than any court could have delivered. Sarah moved with me, and we are partners now, building a company. Based on integrity and mutual respect, we built this new life not on the need to prove anything to anyone, but on the simple desire to be happy. So if you are out there and someone is making you feel small, making you feel like you have to earn their affection, please listen to me. Your value is not determined by their approval. You define what you amount to. Walk away from the people who cannot see your worth and go build your own palace. You are the only one who gets to be king or queen there.